Hey there YouTube, this is Mr.Lubufu and welcome back to another episode of MTG Mastery. This time we're going to be covering how to draft Tempest Block. Now, TSE or Tempest Stronghold Exodus is known to be one of the better drafting formats, or at least I find it to be incredibly entertaining. So let's just go ahead and hop right in. So to begin with some general notes, this format is aggressive, and when I say aggressive I mean very aggressive. We're talking like triple Zendikar levels of craziness. The 1, 2, and 3 mana creatures are very high quality, and the higher curve cards are generally unimpressive. If you focus on the low end of your curve, you will be rewarded. There is also a metric ton of evasion. There is both flying and shadow. We'll cover shadow in a little bit, but you really can't assume that you can block your way into the late game. You have to either race or use your removal on the little creatures. The late game is, if you do get there, dominated by buyback cards. If your deck cannot win fast, it should have a lot of removal and some good buyback spells. Otherwise, you can't really assume to play. And lastly, the fixing might as well not exist. Trying to go more than 2 colors is, to say greedy is an understatement. So this is almost surely a 2-color set. Anyway, let's go ahead and start covering the mechanics. So there are only 2 mechanics in this block, which is incredibly unusual to only have 2. We have buyback, which allows your spell, you pay some additional cost, and that returns the spell to your hand. So your spells suddenly gain a ton of late game power. For example, cards like Capsize, which allow you to just continuously bounce their biggest threat, and they can't just, if they keep recasting, you just keep bouncing it. To even the one that spawns 1/1 rats. And lastly, we have Shadow, which says that shadow creatures can only block and only be blocked by other creatures with shadow. This essentially gives, this sort of evasion that is really hard to deal with because most shadow creatures are very aggressively costed. Anyway, let's go over the relative strength of the colors per set. So in Tempest, red is known to be the best color, followed by black, then white, then blue, then green. And you'll see why red is the best, but it just has way too much removal. In Stronghold, red is the best color again, then blue, then white, then black, then green. So you see red is at the top and green is at the bottom after the first 2 sets, which pulls a switcheroo in Exodus where blue is the top, then green, then black, then white, and then red. So there are some key archetypes that are worth noting if you're drafting TSE. Blue-red control is a pretty solid one. You get rewarded pack 1 with some of the removal in red. In Stronghold, you get the 2 top colors, and in set 3, you get to take advantage of the top blue cards that you really want. Green-black fatties, just playing bigger creatures, is an archetype, though it's, you have to have some good removal in black in order to support this. Red-white aggro is a very good deck because you get to draft the white shadow creatures and the red removal, and it flows really well. And lastly, white-black shadow, where you just assume that you have all the evasion and the removal spells in black to follow it up. Anyway, let's start covering the top cards for drafting. This time, and from now on, I'll be covering them in a little bit more detail. So in white, we have Master Decoy. It is a tapper, and most tappers in Limited tend to be pretty good, so that's how this behaves. Next, we have Rootwater Hunter. Now, Rootwater Hunter is an interesting one to say the least, or rather, because this is such an aggressive format, being able to have a pinger is actually very powerful. There's not much that exists that can survive a Rootwater Hunter in the early turns, because there's so many X1s running around. In black, we have Dark Banishing. It's just a solid removal spell, nothing you can complain about it. In red, we have Rolling Thunder, which I would take over almost any card in the entire set. I'm going to give you guys a second, just read what Rolling Thunder does. And notice that it's actually insane. So Rolling Thunder printed at common is perhaps the most powerful common ever printed for limited purposes. So Yes, if you open a Rolling Thunder, take it. It is very unlikely you'll be past a Rolling Thunder. If you are, congratulations, you are playing red. And lastly, in green, we have Rootwalla. It made an appearance in a core set a while back, and it's just a very solid creature. Having the pump effect makes blocking kind of difficult. At uncommons, there are a couple of key ones worth noting. Puppet Strings is insane. Not only does it keep your colors open, its ability is very powerful in this set. Definitely one of the top cards in the set, after Rolling Thunder, of course. But if you get Puppet Strings, you take it and you play it. And last, we have Spontaneous Combustion, which for 3 mana basically becomes Wrath of God in this format. There are very few things that survive a Spontaneous Combustion. As for bomb rares, Coffin Queen is known to be pretty good. Altar of Dementia, people loved it in Conspiracy, and it's okay in this format. It's not as insane as you would expect. Moving on to Stronghold, where the top white common is Smite. It made an appearance a while back again. Just a solid removal spell. And since this format is so aggressive, you can play your Smite, and it's pretty often just a solid removal spell. In blue, we have Sift. This sort of card draw is not found often in this format and really goes well in the blue-red deck. Because it helps you find your burn a lot easier. In black, we have Cannibalize, which seems sort of like a 2-for-1. Like, you don't really see the value in it, but it can be really powerful when they try to kill your small creature and you're like, cannibalize in response. Okay, now I have a bigger creature and it's hard to deal with. In red, we have Seething Anger. And while it doesn't seem as impressive as you would think, the ability to get +3/+0 and just till end of turn for just red and possibly buyback is pretty relevant, actually. Because there's so much evasion running around, or you get to just instantly trade your guy up, or this becomes Lightning Bolt. And since this format's so fast, having a possibly recurring Lightning Bolt is very good. And in green, we see Lowland Basilisk, which if you compare it to the power level of all the other commons, you see why green is at the bottom of the totem pole. It's just basically a 1/3 with Death Touch. At uncommons, I would like to point out that red once again gets the best card in the set, in Flame Wave. I'm going to let you guys read this one too, because it is functionally Plague Wind. It is Plague Wind printed at uncommon. If you end up, and I've done this before, with a Rolling Thunder and a Flame Wave in your deck, you have outs to any situation, and you are very favored to win. Another powerful uncommon is Calming Licid, which it gives a very powerful effect that can be recurred, which is what makes it kind of nice. Some bomb rares worth noting. Krovax the Cursed is very strong. If he ever resolves, it's very difficult for a lot of decks to deal with him. They have to commit at least a couple of resources to deal with him. And Soltari Champion is a very powerful rare. Not only gets to pack the evasion, but it pumps your whole team, and it goes very well in these sort of white weenie aggro decks that exist in Limited. And lastly, we move on to Exodus, which has at common Shackles for white. It is a recurring passivism effect. Nothing wrong with that. At blue, we have Merfolk Looter. Merfolk Looter makes an appearance in many a core set, and it does exactly what you want. It helps you loot to your burn spells in this format. At black, we have Dothy Jackal. Apart from being a very aggressively costed shadow creature, which they exist in this format, the ability to make your opponent sad by destroying a blocking creature can really be, it really makes combat difficult. At red, we have Anarchist, which basically gets back your burn spells. A lot of people forget that Anarchist only returns sorceries, so keep that in mind. And lastly, we have Jackalope Herd, which is just a very, very powerful green creature. Now, at uncommons, we have a couple of big ones worth noting. We have Sabertooth Wyvern. It's just a very powerful creature. And it's a good follow-up to all the red you may have taken in the first 2 packs, because red is so good. And Forbid, in the late game, becomes really difficult for opponents to resolve a relevant spell if you're ahead. And lastly, perhaps the bombiest rare that people don't realize is actually insane is Equilibrium. I have played with this card. It is stupidly overpowered. Don't get underwhelmed by what it does. It makes all your creatures immune to removal in a removal heavy set, and your opponent can never tap it. That's glorious. And I would like to point out, never ever Gargoram take dominating Licid. Because of the change in the layers rule, dominating Licid now is broken. It is a broken magic card that does not do what it's supposed to, so never take it if you are playing with the modern rule set, especially on Magic Online. Anyway, that's it for this episode of MTG Mastery. I hope you guys learned a lot in this episode. Be sure to check out the other episodes in this series, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you all for watching this episode of MTG Mastery. If you guys are interested in any of the other videos in this series, whether it be lore, draft strategies, pack analysis, or the pack openings themselves, go ahead and click on the annotations now to be taken to playlists with the full list of all uploaded content of that type. Thank you guys all for watching. Rate, comment, and subscribe.